My name's Craig Penwarden, and I'm the renewable energy engineer. My main role is basically to get these wind turbines back into commission, get them back productive, so that they manage to save quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
Even though they're very limited and they're very small machines, we're limited by what we can get from the harbour, what we can get from the ships to the site, and we're also limited by the size of the crane that we have on the island to assemble them. They are designed to work within a specific wind speed. So if you go below that wind speed, they're not very productive, and if you go above that wind speed, they destroy themselves. The wind is destructive, so they will turn themselves out of the wind. 25 years worth of records show that the average wind here is 9 metres a second, and there aren't too many destructive gusts. So these turbines were designed for that kind of wind range. Even these three small, very, very small output machines, they save about £300,000 a year. The diesel bill for the island, it's a very, very small island with a very small population. The generators that are being used still need to run. Whether there's 100 people connected to it or whether there's 1,000 people connected to it, that generator needs to run. And all the time it's running, it's using fuel. So some of the records from the past have shown that savings of like £300,000 to £400,000 a year when these three small turbines are productive. Another 3 of these have just arrived. The sites are currently being considered as the location for the 3 new turbines. I mean, ideally they want to be somewhere around this area because this is where the control room and this is where the service engineer lives. So ideally they want to be somewhere in this location, but this is a protected area. This is a wirebird nesting zone. So you can't sacrifice the environment for the sake of the environment. So even though they save a massive amount of money in diesel that needs to be spent, we don't want to infringe upon a protected species. So the issues are mainly that with this island. Everywhere you go on this island, it's beautiful. There is nowhere on this island that you can put a wind turbine that you're not going to see it. And there are so many areas on the island that are of special scientific interest. The thing with it is the machines aren't that complicated or that expensive. There's always wind. Sometimes there's no wind, so you need to have a backup. You can't just rely on wind power. But here, being an island in the middle of an ocean, we have lots of sea movement as well.
Yeah.
So to be using diesel to make electricity is just insane.
Yeah.
It is really insane. We're looking at developing sea power, hydroelectric and wind combined.
We had 8 endemic birds, and this is the only one left. This one managed to survive, so it's a very hardy bird. We had some petrels, some cuckoos, some pigeons, and some shearwaters. But that was back in the day. I say if you didn't know where the nests were, you would never find it. Right now, she's just making sure that we don't take her eggs. She's keep covering her eggs up. You see where her little feet moving like so? You wanna go look at the eggs? The last census count we did, there's 322. That's single adult birds, and by far that's critically endangered. It's critical endangered, that means it's going downhill. Invasive species are plants that comes to, but people bring to the island, and then starts to regenerate itself at such an alarming rate, it overpowers everything else. And with feral cats and the common monitor here, these things can hide and predate their chicks or their eggs.
This is the St. Helena gumwood, so it's a woody member of the daisy family, so many people will know composites like daisies or dandelions, but it's a tree and it's an ancient relic, so it's basically on St. Helena as a remnant from an age gone by, and it's evolved on St. Helena into something a little bit more unique, and it's now extremely rare. We was once occupied about a third of the island's land area pre-occupation of the island, and was reduced to about 1,000 trees. So this project is all about restoring former gumwood forest and giving St. Helena something back of what it once was. And this is what this project is doing. It's putting back a little bit of that forest in a former part of its range, based on, as I say, the community planting. All the trees that you see in the forest are being planted by someone or for someone. So we only expand the forest as we have interest from individuals to do so. And we started in 2000, hence the Millennium Forest. And in that year, every school child on the island planted a tree. Okay, it gets really confusing when I talk about many of the endemic species here, because they all have common names that many people will relate to in other parts of the world, but they're actually species that are not closely related. We have here a gumwood, which is not a eucalypt. We have a redwood that's not a redwood. We have cabbage trees that are certainly not cabbages. Well, they're ancient relics from a distant time, and they're endemic to St Helena and found nowhere else in the world. In 1995, when work started on creating the national park, there was a census of how many trees that were left on the island, and there were only about, well, there were less than 1,000. There were just 800 of these trees left on the peaks. So when I say they're the most common, they're still incredibly rare, although common for the endemic trees. So we have the black cabbage tree, which is, you see behind us. So what they do is those little black cabbage seedlings, or dogwoods or whitewoods, will germinate in the bark of the tree fern, and then they will both grow together, and eventually the cabbage tree will get too heavy, they will both collapse onto the forest floor, and then they will both carry on growing. So now we're beside the St Helena redwood, not related to the American redwood in any way, shape or form. It's an endemic genus to St Helena in the family Trichetiopsis, and it once formed the major canopy tree on the island in the sort of moist gumwood forest at about 700 metres above sea level. It's now extinct in the wild, or was extinct in the wild. The last tree in the wild died in the 1960s, and what we're standing in now is a field gene bank. Is basically a group of trees that have been brought up to provide seed for future restoration work to reintroduce it back into the wild. I first started working on the redwoods in 1993, and at that time there were just 7 trees that were flowering and reproducing, and I carried out a series of cross-pollinations, basically running around the island from one tree to the other, carrying pollen and putting it onto the receptive stigma, the female part of a tree that I wanted to then start to produce seed. And I've basically been doing that from one generation to the next, rather like selective tree breeding, trying to select for fitness, to see whether we can actually recover these trees to something of their former stance, something that they once resembled. It became rare very, very early on. It was the most important timber species to early settlers. So the island was settled in 1659. By 1724, the governor of the island was already proclaiming it as rare. I don't think the story's ended yet for the redwood. I mean, I'd love to think that for a tree that once was so strong and tall and majestic, that we can bring it back again, but maybe we can't. It's as I say, it's one of many species on the island that was reduced to such small numbers. Its sister species, the ebony, down to 2. Some of the gumwoods, the bastard gumwood down to a single tree, now extinct in the wild. False gumwood down to 8. You're talking extreme rarity on St Helena. Okay, I've got a smile on my face now because we've got some good news. We've got some she cabbage seed, and the she cabbage is one of the trees that was also part of the former moist gumwood woodland, of which the redwood would have been a component. And just like the redwood, it became almost extinct on the island. It's now only found in one place in the wild, and there's about 5 trees there. And it's all about trying to find out whether we can pull these extremely rare species back from the brink of extinction and create opportunities for them to be reproducing naturally.